The next segment is going to be the fans speak. So basically, we've had fans, tons of followers of yours apparently, ask so many questions, and we've screened a few of them. We'll just make it more of like a quick fire, right, Arf?
Yep,
yeah, let's do a
good.
quick fire.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, rapid fire answers.
All right. All right. Let's do the first one then. From the Geek House Show team, they're based from Kuwait. Hi, Fabian. Our question will be, in your opinion, who would go along well with Deadpool from the DC universe and why?
Harley Quinn, because when they're not having sex, they'd be trying to kill each other, and that would be fun.
That's perfect.
That's perfect. That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Next question, Arf.
We have Iba. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name right, and this is going to be a really quick answer, I think. Do you personally think Deadpool would be able to lift Mjolnir?
No.
That's what I thought.
No. Not even be allowed in the same room as Mjolnir, much less lift it.
All right. Next question is from Zenat and Alistair. In your opinion, what would be an interesting way of making Deadpool fit into the MCU?
For me, the most interesting way would be if Disney paid me to tell them what I thought would be the most interesting way to fit Deadpool into the Marvel universe.
Perfect. Great answer.
So that is my
We're talking to
honest
Kevin
answer.
Feige. All right. Arf, next one.
Oh my goodness, how am I supposed to do this when I'm in tears, my lord? This is from Jeannie. Was there one thing you really wanted in a Deadpool comic that wasn't accepted or wouldn't make the cut? If so, what was it and why couldn't you do it? Ooh, controversial.
Yeah, no, there were a lot of jokes that were cut because legal had problems with it. Most of those dealt with jokes regarding real people or brands or politicians, but there was never a story that I wasn't allowed to do in Cable and Deadpool. And mind you, this was when the character didn't get even more excessive the way he became after 2010 or so. Mm-hmm. In terms of the violence, in terms of even the humor. So I worked with a Deadpool that existed in the mainstream Marvel Comics universe, and I did that very comfortably.
Right.
Every single month we had stuff the lawyers asked us to change, but I learned that if I add 5 really over-the-top things to every script, the lawyers will focus on that, and I'll get away with the 2 or 3 things that are less than, and those are the ones I wanted to begin with. It took me a little while to figure. It took me a little while to figure that out, but we did. So it wasn't 5. Every issue wasn't 5 things. Every issue you put in 2 or 3 really bad things, you know they're gonna flag, because the goal is to make them think they did something. Meanwhile, you're getting away with the 2 or 3 little things that you wanted to get away with, and it started to work pretty smoothly after about the first year of Deadpool. I figured that out. But other than that, really, I never had an issue because I'm not a big proponent in super violence and gore and all of that stuff in the comics anyway. So I saw they were doing some things in the comics after I was done writing Cable and Deadpool 12 years ago. Geez, that I was like, ew. Not only wouldn't I ever even care to do that, I couldn't believe Marvel was choosing to do that. Right. It kind of bored me, and it always has. And we've talked about this before. That kind of stuff just bores me. It's not what I want out of my comic books, much less my Marvel comic books.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, I have another question. This is from Anthony from the Philippines. Was Deadpool originally intended to be an arch enemy of the New Mutants? If yes, who would have been originally planned rivalry would be? Is it Sam Guthrie or Cannonball or Nathan Summers, Cable?
Well, he was, the way Rob originally intended him, he was just a mercenary for hire. And in this particular instance, he was hired to kill Cable.
Okay.
And later on, it became more of a conflict with more of the characters from the X-Force team.
Yep.
But it wasn't a Spider-Man Green Goblin thing. Deadpool didn't bring any personal history against Cable. They met for the first time in New Mutants '98, in that capacity. So it really was just more a matter of he would go after whoever he was hired to go after. That's all.
Fantastic.
He was a mercenary
Right.
as a killer, just like I am as a writer. Whoever's hiring me is who I will go after.
Fantastic. Arf?
All right. So like Deadpool, I was saying, Fabian, you have no qualms or principles on who hires you. That's awesome. Good to know. Our next question is from Jamie Asparez, who seems to be a
I have some qualms and principles around words. I wouldn't say no qualms or principles.
All right.
Perez, who seems to be a really big X-Men fan, he's asked, would you ever be interested in doing a crossover of X-Force, Mutant X, Excalibur, and Deadpool? Holy cow! In one comic book series, like bring them all together. Jeez.
That is
maybe a one-shot.
It's an incredibly specific request. And
He knows his
my
Marvel
answer is,
Yeah.
unfortunately, those are not the kinds of things I give thought to in
Mhm.
my daily life anymore. If an editor calls me up and says, would you be interested in doing a crossover with X-Force, Mutant X, Excalibur, and Deadpool in one series? My answer would probably be no, because it sounds like way too much work. But then I'd say, well, maybe that's interesting. So most freelance writers tend not to come up with stories unless the companies are asking them to do that. So an editor just called me a month ago and asked me to come up with a story, and I've been percolating that. You know what I mean? But I wasn't percolating it before the editor called me up. So the answer to your question is, my answer would be no, unless someone asks.
Okay. All right. Another guy, Jasper J, he's asking, after all these years, is there an ability that you wish Deadpool doesn't have? Like the ability
Yes.
to heal? Yeah.
I wish that he didn't have such a ridiculous healing factor the way he does now.
Okay.
I think it's a huge mistake from a storytelling standpoint to constantly expand the parameters under which that can be stretched out. So if he can remake himself from a drop of blood, that's kind of stupid. You get to the point where nothing matters anymore. The truth is that under the parameters of the original intentions, Rob had wanted him to have a healing factor. The editor, Bob Harris, asked me not to call it that because he didn't want copies of Wolverine running around. He wanted Wolverine to retain some uniqueness, and Wolverine was the character who had the healing factor. So I literally, in the comics, called it perpetual cellular regeneration, and tied it into his origin about trying to keep the cancer at bay in his body.
Nice.
In order to keep the cancer at bay in his body, his cells are constantly regenerating. So it's not so much a healing factor, oh, I'm injured, I heal. It's that his cells are always cycling, and that included his brain, which is why he was the way he was, right?
Right.
But because the letterer, Chris Eliopoulos, refused to letter perpetual cellular regeneration every single issue, it ended up just becoming a de facto healing factor.
Wow.
And that works really well if you want to have your character get shot, or if you want to have something funny like his head gets cut off. But when I was writing him, the head had to be reattached to the body, or he would die. In an issue of Cable and Deadpool, his head did get severed, and it's getting kicked around in a room when Wolverine is fighting all these Hydra agents, and they know that if they don't reattach the head to the body soon to reconnect everything, he's going to have brain death because his brain won't get oxygen. So yes, he will die. It wasn't that he could grow a new head from his shoulders or a new body from his head. That's too cartoony to me. That's too excessive to me, and I think it takes away a lot of your storytelling options as a result of it.
I love that answer.
That's a nice answer for it, actually.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. So our next question is from Shinx, Antonio, and Abdullah.
Yes. Got three
All
guys.
three people?
They all asked this question.
Were three people required to write this one question?
Yeah, the same.
Did they write it one word at a time? Did Shinx come up with how and Antonio come up with did? And okay. Good teamwork, guys.
It is a really long question, isn't it? It
Yes.
really is a long question. I mean, so maybe it was teamwork. So the question is his name.
Exactly. How did it become
Well,
Deadpool? The name.
Rob Liefeld came up with the name Deadpool. He has told the story a few times. I honestly don't know what the response really was. I think we always thought it was just based on an old 70s movie that had Paul Newman in it, and he just liked the combination of the two words. He said a story that his father and him had some sort of a Deadpool game where they played about people dying or something. I'm not really sure. It didn't matter to me. That was the character that I was handed. His name is Deadpool, and this is what he looks like.
Right.
Okay, I came up with Wade Wilson, and that was to the point I talked about earlier, specific to the idea that this was Spider-Man wearing the accoutrements of Taskmaster and Deathstroke. So I named him Wade Wilson as a pun on Slade Wilson, who is Deathstroke's secret identity. But really, it was about the George Perez pouch and belt influence that was on the character. But the truth of the matter is the pouch and belt influence was also something Michael Golden was drawing on all of his G.I. Joe covers. If you look at any G.I. Joe cover of that time, Mike Golden was drawing those pouches. Art Adams was drawing pouches on Long Shot in his miniseries in the mid 80s. So those are all things that influenced 12-year-old Rob Liefeld. So that by the time he's 20-year-old Rob Liefeld, he's drawing and designing Deadpool. So that was the in joke. Calling him Wade Wilson was always just an in joke between me and Rob, not intended for anyone else. And it could have stayed that way forever if I didn't talk about it in an interview like 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And then all of a sudden it turned into a bad game of telephone on the internet, whereby by the time the 10th person has relayed the story, it's now he was created as a parody of Deathstroke, which
isn't.
was, you just go, huh? How did you get from here to there? Okay. But so Deadpool is a name Rob came up with. Wade Wilson is the name I came up with.
Fantastic. All right. We have only 2 questions left.
All right, Chinese whispers for the win. Someone only known as Marvelous. Apparently has asked a question. Is there a Deadpool arc or team up that you personally find really underrated, but have you read enough of them to comment on that?
I have not read enough of them at all to comment, so I will say that I think Cable and Deadpool issues 1 through 50 are just the greatest and very underrated, except by the people who actually read them. The people who actually read those issues rate them very highly.
Exactly.
But other than that, tremendously underrated. The 50 issue Cable and
That's
Deadpool. You could buy the omnibus for thousands of dollars if you want.
A totally unbiased answer for Marvelous right there.
Exactly. Holy nutcracker. All right. There's one more last question, and this is coming from Paul. And the question is, does Deadpool know your birthday is at the end of the year?
Paul, I hate to tell you this, but Deadpool is a fictional character who appears in comic books and movies. So the answer is no, he doesn't know my birthday is at the end of the year. Unless someone writes him to know that my birthday is at the end of the year. That's just an assumption on my part, Paul. The truth is, maybe he hasn't sent me any birthday presents, not because he's not real, but because he's just an ass. I'm not sure which. Okay.
All right, fantastic. Well, that wraps up our segment.